Hello YouTube family, my name is Nimish and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, I am based in Auckland, New Zealand. I am Student Product Marketing Manager. I work for a tech company. I'm really passionate about product management, product marketing and fitness, and through this channel my aim is to share my key learning and experiences throughout my journey of 11 plus years in this function and various industries, and hopefully it can help some of you who are planning to go or on the same path. So stay tuned to know more. So this is the part 2 video of the product marketing series of video which I plan to make, and this video is focused on customer segmentation and developing your ideal customer persona. Now, customer segmentation is one of the very important topics for a product marketer or for any marketeer, and practically how do you go about segmenting your customers and developing an ideal customer persona is what we're going to cover in this video. And I know a lot of you might be thinking, and especially the ones who are just entering into marketing or product marketing, what are the practical ways to segment your customers? And we talk a lot about customer personas, ideal customer profile. How do you practically go about building those personas and profile, and who exactly is responsible for doing that? So all of that we'll cover in this video, so stay tuned. So let's start with the first part, which is customer segmentation. Now, before we go on to understand how do you practically do customer segmentation, let's understand what segments are and what are customer segments. To just simplify the concept, imagine customer segments as a group of customers having similar needs, behavior, attitudes, and characteristics, right? And the reason to segment these customers and the reason to do segmentation is basically so you can identify this distinct cohorts, so that you can serve these cohorts in a way which meets their needs, tailored to those segments, right? So that's very important. A simple example is you have apple, oranges mixed. A group of apples is one segment, a group of oranges another segment. It's a very simplified example, but you get the general idea. So now let's understand why we need to do customer segmentation. In marketing, the concept of segmentation, as many of you might know, is really old, and there are very well established principles on how to segment your customers. So if anybody is interested to learn more about segmentation, I would advise you to kind of see some literature online on what segmentation is. But practically at a very basic level, the reason why you want to segment your customer is so that you can tailor your products and services, the way you communicate them and the way you deliver them, in a way which meets the needs of those segments. So let's take a simple example of a camera. So imagine there are two distinct segments or customers using camera. Let's call it one segment is professional and another segment is the general public. Now the way you communicate the features, the value that camera will or that's your product will deliver to a professional photographer is going to be different to what you will communicate to the general public. If you communicate to the general public that your camera has so many professional features which probably they might never use, that might not resonate well with them, right? And the same way for professional photographer. So this is just one small example to let you know the difference and the importance why we need to segment those customers. So now that we've understood the basics of segmentation and why segmentation is important, let's try and find out how do you actually go about the process of segmenting your customers if you're a product marketer. So before we go on to the process, there are actually 4 basic types of segmentation. It's called demographic, geographic, psychographic, and behavioral. Again, just Google search these types of segmentation and you will find various literature explaining each of them, but essentially is on a high level, these are broadly the 4 categories you can segment your customers. So firstly, what you really want to do is identify your customers and understand your customer. Again, I keep on saying this in every video, getting an understanding, a deep understanding on your customer is super important. So once you know what your customer is and what each of your customer would look like, then you basically go on to the next level where you try and identify what kind of data do you have about your customers, right? Let's say you have a product already in the market and you are doing an exercise to segment or renew the customer segments to better tailor your product and services. So the first step is basically finding out what level of data you currently have about your customers. You might be having basic information like demographic information, example, what's their age, or firmographic information like what's their company name, what's their email ID, etc. So these are basically demographic or firmographic questions. You also might have their geographic information like where are they located, which region, so on and so forth, what's their address. But the most important part here is getting as much data possible on the behavioral and psychographic data. So it's basically how your customers are behaving with your product. And by that I mean, let's say if you have a SaaS product or a software product, what's the behavior of a particular set of customers? Let's say a particular set of a customer is using a particular feature a lot than others, or spending a lot more time in a particular functionality than others, right? So that can talk about or give you an indication about their need for their particular functionality, what they are doing. Then I mentioned about psychographic. Basically, you have to find out what are their inherent needs, motivators, and attitude, right? And that could be captured either by questions you would have had in your onboarding journey, or interaction with past interaction with the sales or customer success team. But essentially, it's trying to understand what level of data currently you have about your customers in your organization. There can also be instances where for a completely new product, let's say you are in a discovery stage, your product is not there in the market, so you might not actually have a lot of existing data about the customers. Then how do you go about segmenting your customers? And that's where a lot of market research, what you do both primary and secondary, is going to come to your help. I'm going to make a separate video on what type of market research are and what type of market research you should do as a product marketeer. But just to give you an example, if you don't have a lot of data about existing customers, you rely a lot on research. And if you already have a lot of data about your customers with a product, then you rely on that data to basically segment your customers. So now that you've defined, and now that you know what kind of data you can actually get to classify your customers, now is a step where you have to actually break them down into different segments. As I mentioned earlier, there are various ways you can segment customers. Broadly, there are 4 broad categories. And usually when you actually segment your customers, you use a mix of these general types of segmentation. So basically, you will have a segment of customers where you will have a certain demographic or firmographic information, certain geographic information, but also certain behavioral and psychographic information about their attitude, their needs, their wants, their behaviors, and their demographics. So all of that combined will give you a particular segment. So before you actually go on to really segmenting them, there are certain key points you should remember about the segments. First one, that your segments should be distinct. So by that I mean, don't create segments which are too similar and might just differ in a couple of points. You want your segments to be really distinct. A lot of people, a lot of marketeers, I find they do this mistake where in an effort to create more segments, or in an effort to really differentiate those segments, they just use small 1 or 2 parameters which might be different between those 2 segments. But if you just take a very high level holistic view, your product or service could actually meet the needs for both of these segments, right? So those are not distinct enough for you to tailor your offering. And that's the reason, and the reason why you don't want to go to that route is you don't want to create so many segments so that your offering becomes too complex to serve each of these segments. The second point to remember is that your segments should be big enough and should be addressable. And by that I mean, you want to make sure that your segments are not too similar and not so small that they are not servable, or they are too similar to be served by tailoring your product, right? So because then that kind of defeats the whole purpose of segmentation. So now you have the data, you have understood the key points to remember for segmentation. So now practically, how do you segment your customers? Again, like everything in product marketing, this exercise should not be done alone. It's a cross-functional exercise, and you need to rely heavily on the analytics team, if you have one, to actually get the insights and data you would need. You would also need to work closely with your product manager, with the design research team if you have. The reason is all of these functions are very close to the customer, so they understand the needs, the behavior and the pains of the customer. So again, product marketing should kind of lead this exercise in getting the team together to arrive at a common outcome, basically defining the segments, the common segments for your product or service. So once you have the data, the first thing I would advise you to get a workshop with this cross-functional team and try and first map out the existing way where you have segmented the customers. So, and try and find out patterns there. What was your primary attribute of segmentation? Was it just on demographics? That means you just classified your customers based on their demographic and geographic information, or did you also use some behavioral and attitudinal information there? Typically nowadays, just segmenting customers on the demographic is not a good practice, because nowadays, since so much data is available, the more behavioral and attitudinal data you can get, the more deeper you can get to the emotional need of the customer, the better you'll be able to not only understand your customer, but also tailor your offering accordingly to meet that underlying emotional need, and eventually that would lead to the success of the product. So once you have developed the baseline through that cross-functional workshop, then you want to use whatever data sources you have to put more behavioral and attitudinal attributes to those segments. And so now when you have all the data in place, you have your baseline in place, now if possible, try and get more behavioral and attitudinal data of the customer. If it's not possible currently, if you don't have that information, then I would advise doing a short round of research. It could be primary research by talking to these customers, or doing a survey with them through the design research team. Whatever method you use, the goal should be to get more emotional and behavioral data and use those attributes in combination with other demographic, geographic information you have to create this distinct cohort. So now you have done the customer segmentation, you have this wonderful workshop, and then all of the team members are aligned on how you're going to segment the customers. What's the next step? The next important step is developing your customer persona. So now what is a customer persona? To put it very simply, customer persona is giving life or taking a real life example of that particular segment, and basically that persona is used as a tool to socialize what that customer segment means broadly within the organization. So the very first step in developing the customer persona again is a cross-functional collaboration. As I said earlier, in this process, your design research team should be heavily involved along with you, because again, these two functions, product marketing and design research, are the most closest to the customers. And also, if possible, you can get somebody from your customer success team or sales teams who might be able to give you more real life examples of their customer segments. But the idea here is to, once you have defined those segments, the idea here is to connect those segments to the real life use cases or examples of those customers. So the first step is, once you have listed down the segments, find out a real use case. What does that customer in real life look like? If possible, get in touch with the customer if you already have that through customer success or a sales team, and just interview them. What you really want to do is basically develop what we call as an ideal customer profile for that segment. If you just Google templates for ideal customer profile or customer persona, there are lots and lots of templates available, but there are few key information which you want to capture. As I mentioned earlier, whatever attributes you have listed down for the customer segments, right? Basically your demographics, your behavior, your attitudes, their needs, their pain points, their problems, all of that you have to basically write down, let's say in a single template, to give you an idea on what that customer could look like in real life. And that's essentially a customer persona. So that's an exercise basically you do and you iterate together with the design research team. So now once you have developed the customer personas, it's very important to validate that with some data sets, or just talk to actually the real life customers and validate a few assumptions which you might have made in those customer personas. So for example, you made an assumption on a certain attitude or for this particular persona, so you want to make sure that you either validate that or support that with adequate research data sources you would have had, or conduct a short survey or talk actually to the real customers and validate your assumptions. And once you have done that, the most important part is socializing those customer personas within your cross-functional team and the organization. I think this step is overlooked by a lot of people, especially in product marketing. So just developing customer persona is not the end. The reason why you develop customer persona is basically to socialize this within your cross-functional pod, so that everybody understand why are you building and for whom are you building, and to have that customer empathy and understanding within the wider organizations. So try and socialize this to various forums, most importantly to your development pod, to all the other senior stakeholders, and that will help clarify who are the customers exactly you're targeting for, what are the behaviors, and Basically, having that common understanding really helps drive a team forward toward the common goal. So that was all about customer segmentation and developing customer personas. If you want to check out a really good example, check out how Spotify has developed their customer personas. You can just Google Spotify customer personas and you'll get their blog post. It's a very elaborate process they have listed down, and it's really good. I would highly recommend you to go and check that out. But let me know how you found this video or any other topics you would like me to cover. Let me know in the comments. I hope you like the video. Please hit like and subscribe, which will help me to make more of this, hopefully, which is valuable to you. So thank you and see you in the next video. Bye.